Summer's here, so it's time to review some summer themed games, and what better fit than Santa Monica from AEG? This game, you'll be drafting cards from the tableau to build up an oceanfront in Santa Monica. Now, will you design your oceanfront to be better for the locals, for tourists, or maybe just a natural beachfront?
Each player will begin the game with their own starting feature tile from which you'll be building off into either beach cards or street cards in two different rows to the left or right of your starting tile. That tile also has a unique scoring condition as well as a VIP and possibly some other figures. There are locals and tourists, the two different types that will be interacting with your cards and moving around, and you'll be gaining them as the game goes on. On your turn, you will take a look at the lineup of 8 cards that is available for all players to choose from, but you will only be able to take from the front row of 4 cards. You'll take any one of those that you like and place it somewhere in your personal tableau. If it's a street, it goes on the bottom row. If it's a beach, it goes on the top row. And as long as it is adjacent to one of those other cards that exists in your personal play area, that's okay. Now, depending on what card it is, it will probably tell you that it gives you either some tourists or locals that you can play with. It might give you sand dollars. These are special tokens that you can spend for various abilities as the game goes on. It may also have its own scoring condition, so it might want to be next to certain types of cards. Each card has its own type. Some of them actually have multiple. They could be a local or tourist spot, business, sports, or nature, or for the beachfront, you'll see a lot of wave cards because it's the beach and there are waves up there. You'll also notice that there is a food truck and a foodie, these pink meeples that will go in front of certain cards in that front row. Those will give you a little bonus. If you take the card where the foodie is, you get to move one of your people in your personal area. They can move one space in any direction that you want, and that's important because there are certain cards that want people in them, and you'll need to get them there to score points. If you take from the food truck, then you get a sand dollar, which again you can use to pay for certain abilities. If you do choose to take the card in front of the food truck or foodie, then that token will move one space forward. And if they both land on the same space at the same time, that becomes a very powerful option. If someone takes that card, they get to either take 2 sand dollars or move 2 people or do one of each. Once you've chosen a card from the front row, the card in the back row moves forward. So now that becomes available for the next player, and the back space refills from the deck, and the next turn begins.
Now that we've gone over the core mechanics, let's go back to those sand dollars because they add an interesting wrinkle to your strategy. At the start of the game, you're going to choose 2 out of 4 sand dollars, each one with its own different side, and use them for the game. They add a new rule which you can use to pay with sand dollars. So for example, this one allows you to pay 2 sand dollars to pick any local or tourist spot from out of all 8, not just the front row. And you can place it, of course, into your little ocean front and get to move people. These have some very strong abilities which allow you to manipulate what you normally could or could not do on your turn. After you do all this and someone gets 14 cards, you initiate the end of the game. After everyone gets another turn, you're going to look at your cards and add up points. As Jonathan stated earlier, when you add some of these cards to your oceanfront, you will get an immediate reward. However, in the box to the right, it'll tell you how this scores at the end of the game. For example, some of them could give you points based on sand dollars you have, while this one, for example, looks at chains, which is connecting cards of whatever type it's looking for. In addition, you will have this, I like to call it the towel tile, but it's called the scoring tile. And it has 3 rules, and there are 3 different tiles that you could use for the game, and these rules will change from like usually looking at waves, looking at change, and then losing points depending where you people end up in your oceanfront. You're going to calculate all these points using this fun little scoring pad and see who has the best oceanfront in Santa Monica.
So this is a relatively light game for 2 to 4 players. As you saw, it has elements of card drafting as well as card placement. And it does do one of those things that we often talk about that we enjoy in games where it's sort of a tableau builder. You get to have something that you're building up and you're planning it out depending on which cards are available. Hopefully you're planning it to the best of your ability. And by the end of the game, you have a little beachfront area with a cool board boardwalk or sidewalk or whatever it is. You might have an arcade, you might have a movie theater, or you might just have a bunch of weddings going on. And that can be fun to build thematically and I think interesting to build mechanically, trying to figure out, based on your starting zone versus what cards come up, what other people are taking, and how you build off of all those things.
Speaking of the starting feature, we actually forgot to mention the VIP. Each starting feature starts with this little green meeple. He's your VIP. And the rule on them is every time you move them to the location that your starting tile states, you leave one of these footprint tokens, and those are more points at the end of the game. It's just sort of this cute way of this guy going around, in my opinion, he's taking photos or maybe selfies of himself or herself there at all these places.
I think that's correct.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like it would fit Southern California. I also like that it's not just simply drafting and placing. There is a bit of I don't know if worker placement's the right term, but it's meeple management because no matter what, you're going to do something that usually is losing points if you don't have meeples in these little circles. And some of them say like 3 points for getting any 3 meeples in there. This one needs 2 locals in that circle. So some of them can be very specific. And it just becomes this game of like, do I want to take this card? It gives me 4 more meeple and I don't know where I'm going to put them. Or like, oh, I have to move them there because at the end of the game, you pretty much can get to move everyone like a little bit, not too much. So you can be like, if I can just get him within 2 or 3 spaces, he'll make it there. So it's another little twist on top of simply just taking the card you want.
Yeah, definitely another layer to that is seeing what your opponents are doing and if you want to potentially stop them from taking something. And sometimes you also might want to take, again, you have that food truck and the foodie, and that's a big thing because usually you want to try to avoid pairing them up together because you don't want the next player to get that extra power from it, but sometimes there's a card that you just really want, so that's worth it for you to do. There's all these things to take into account, as well as, again, what your starting bonus might be and what your VIP is interested in. So I like that it pushes you in these little directions, so it's not like a totally blank slate where you just have to work everything out and decide how you want to do your points. Like from the very beginning, and then even more so as you develop, you always kind of have a nudge in certain directions.
There is a bit of randomness for what cards come out of the deck. You can have some very weird games when you never get any chain or beach cards somehow. It's possible, but what's sort of nice about this compared to maybe, for example, a deck lineup in a basic deck building game, you can see what cards are going to be available next, which means going back to this, let's say I really wanted this fish shop. Maybe I do move the foodie and the bus here to sort of make this skate park very tempting. Or if I know that someone else wants this fish park, I'm like, I want this card here, but I don't want this to go drop down on your turn.
Right. Sometimes I would want a card in the back, so I wouldn't take the card in the front because I don't want it to be available for the next person. I want them to take that card so I can get the one in the back.
I think that helps remove a lot of the pressure of like, let me just take this. Oh, the card I want is up. You can sort of plan around it, which is very nice, at least for me.
Yeah, and it's a fun, cute theme, I think, and the little meeples are very funny. It's very simple, but and the art, there's no people on it because your people are the meeples.
Yeah,
but it's got a fun, cartoony style to it that I like. That doesn't like overwhelm, doesn't take over the game, doesn't distract you, but it's very fitting for the style.
No, it made me very miss California. The visually, it's really beautiful. It's almost interesting because there's no people. It's just like
actually for right now, it's very accurate to real life to what some of those beaches look like.
Maybe
we'll see.
Depending when you're watching this.
Yeah, we'll see.
And the cards themselves, even like this restaurant here, if fishes were dishes, it's like all these little cute artwork and stuff. It's just that very visually appealing kind of game. Crits and misses for Santa Monica.
Crits. You are limited by spaces available in your play area as well as which cards are available for you to take. So when you are able to place the cards that you want into the places they need to go, it's very satisfying to build up that beachfront.
Throwing on top of that, literally, the mechanic of adding and managing meeple on top of those cards means it's not simply just take a card and add it to your lineup.
Because the cards that come out and the different scoring objectives will change every game, it's always going to feel different, especially when you bring into consideration the sand dollar tiles with abilities that can greatly affect your strategy. The game's theme and artwork is cute and pleasant and will make you feel like you're having happy times on the beach. It's appropriate for a lighter type of game.
Misses. We called this a drafting game earlier in the video, but unlike other games that use the drafting mechanic, there really is only just the one hand. So outside of your turn to draft, there's quite a bit of downtime until it comes back around to you.
Other than taking a card that someone else may want or possibly manipulating the position of the food truck or the foodie, there is really no player interaction, so it can be a lonely or perhaps boring experience outside your own turn.
Most of the sand dollar tiles I found enjoyable, but one allows you to gain 2 cards at once, which pretty much changes the end of game clock. Because it ends when someone gets 14 cards, other players are either forced to also use that ability to make sure they end up with the same number of cards, or miss out on filling up their oceanfront. Santa Monica is a very calm game when you're just building up an oceanfront and seeing what comes of it, but one of the sand dollar tiles allows you to gain 2 cards. Now, for me, this sort of ruined the calming experience I had with the game because it changed the timer. Usually it's when someone gets 14, then everyone else gets to make sure they get 14. But because of this, when that person gets 14, other people may be at 12, 11, depending on how many times they were able to trigger that ability. So because of that, it changes the pressure and how you think of the game. And I thought that made it, took away maybe the calming experience I had in just gaining the beach or street cards I wanted.
Yeah, it's definitely alters the experience of the game. It definitely adds a little bit of a clock to it differently than the normal game has. It didn't really bother me too much. I feel like, everyone has the opportunity to do it, and it could work out that you're not able to trigger it as much. So I don't think it's unbalanced or anything, but I could see where you would be coming from, where it does change the vibe of the game, and that just might not be your thing. But fortunately, I think for both of us, it's relatively minor since, you don't have to use it if you don't want to, right?
Yes, there are 3 other sand tiles, each of them double-sided, so you're not going to miss out too much.
Yeah. Overall, for me, I think there's a lot to like about this game. Again, it feels like just a relatively light, quick-moving game. You could just hang out and play. It's not too intense unless you really make it intense with analysis paralysis, figuring out which card to draw, which you could. It is possible. But, I don't think it's a hugely ambitious game, if that makes sense. It's not something that I think will really stick out in my mind in years to come, but it is pleasant. It is fun. And because it's relatively quick and easy to play, it's one that I definitely wouldn't mind coming back to if somebody suggested it.
To me, like I said, I found it to be very calming and just setting up the cards together. Visually, it's very enjoyable and really cute with these different restaurants and shops and just putting them together. It's not like blowing my mind, but it's definitely one that I feel very happy to have at the table because it just soothes me. Maybe it's because I need that more.
And you're a California native, so for you, it's like going home again. Well, if anyone out there watching is from Santa Monica or has visited it or has just played this game and you have thoughts about it, let us know in those comments down below. Tell us what you think of the game. Are there any sand dollar tiles you like or dislike? Are there specific strategies or starting tiles that you tend to go towards more as you play? It'd be interesting to hear what you think. Talk to us down there. Otherwise, that's our review of Santa Monica. Until next time, I'm Jonathan.
I'm Will.
And this was Roll for Crit.
If you love board game content, do us a favor, like and subscribe, and support us on Patreon.
Keep watching our content to guarantee you'll top deck a good video.